Stop everything you're doing right now. Look around you. See that camera on your phone watching you, the screen recording every movement of your fingers, every click, every pause. Feel the weight of the clothes you chose to fit in, the schedule. You follow religiously the invisible rules that dictate how you should sit, how you should speak, how you should exist in this very moment. Do you think you're free? Do you think your choices are really yours? Michel Foucault whispers in your ear a truth that will shatter everything you believe about freedom. The soul is the prison of the body. And today, you're going to discover that the prison you inhabit has no visible bars, yet it's more oppressive than any cell ever built by humanity. You are living in a disciplinary society, and you don't even realize it. Every breath you take is measured. Every step you take is monitored. Every desire you feel has been carefully cultivated by invisible hands that shape your very existence. You wake up at the same time, check your phone in the same obsessive pattern, follow the same routes to work, consume the same media, think the same thoughts that millions of others are thinking at this exact moment. This isn't coincidence. This is discipline. This is control, so sophisticated, so seamless, that you mistake it for your own free will. Michel Foucault, the French philosopher who dared to look behind the curtain of modern society, spent his life unraveling the threads of this invisible web that binds us all. He saw what others refused to see. That power in the modern world doesn't operate through brute force or royal decree, but through a subtle, pervasive system of discipline that transforms our very souls into instruments of our own oppression. Power is not an institution and not a structure. Neither is it a certain strength we are endowed with. It is the name that one attributes to a complex, strategical situation in a particular society. But before we dive into the abyss of Foucault's revelations, before we confront the uncomfortable truth about the prison we call civilization, you need to understand something crucial. This isn't just an intellectual exercise. This isn't philosophy. For the sake of philosophy, what you're about to learn will change how you see every relationship, every job, every institution, every moment of your life. You will never again be able to walk through the world with the same naive belief in your own autonomy. You will see the strings, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. Picture this. It's the 18th century, and Jeremy Bentham designs something called the panopticon, a circular prison where a single guard in a central tower can observe all prisoners without them knowing whether they're being watched. The prisoners, never knowing when they're under surveillance, begin to police themselves. They internalize the gaze of the guard. They become their own jailers. Foucault looked at this architectural nightmare and realized something terrifying. This isn't just a prison design. This is the blueprint for modern society. Every classroom where you learned to sit in neat rows, every office where you work under the watchful eye of managers and cameras, every social media platform where every thought is recorded and analyzed. These are all The guard tower is everywhere and nowhere at once. The surveillance is constant, invisible, and most importantly, it has trained you to watch yourself. You don't need external force to conform because you've internalized the discipline. You've become your own prison guard. Discipline makes individuals. It is the specific technique of a power that regards individuals both as objects and as instruments of its exercise. Do you feel that? That chill running down your spine? That's the recognition of truth. You are not just subject to discipline. You are the product of it. Everything you think makes you unique, individual, special. Your personality, your preferences, your desires. These have all been carefully shaped by disciplinary mechanisms that have been operating on you. Since the moment you were born, Think about your morning routine. You wake up at a specific time, not because you naturally want to, but because society has trained you to believe that certain hours are productive and others are wasteful. You brush your teeth in a particular way, following patterns drilled into you by parents, teachers, advertisements. You choose clothes that express your individual style, but that style has been predetermined by fashion industries, peer pressure, social norms. You check your phone, scroll through feeds designed by algorithms that know your behavioral patterns better than you know yourself. Every single action you take, every choice you make, has been subtly guided by invisible forces of discipline. Your body, which you think of as your most private, personal possession, is perhaps the most disciplined thing of all. Foucault understood that power operates most effectively when it targets the body, not through violence, but through what he called biopower. Your body has been trained to sit for 8 hours a day, to eat at specific times, to desire certain foods, to move in particular ways. Your posture right now, as you watch this video, has been shaped by years of schooling that taught you how to position yourself in submission to authority. Your sexual desires, your aesthetic preferences, even your emotional responses, all of these have been molded by disciplinary technologies that you mistake for natural inclinations. The body is directly involved in a political field. Power relations have an immediate hold upon it. They invest it, mark it, train it, torture it, force it to carry out tasks, to perform ceremonies, to emit signs. Feel that weight settling on your chest. That's the weight of recognition. Your body is not your own. It never has been. But here's where it gets even darker. The most insidious aspect of disciplinary power is that it doesn't just control your actions, it shapes your very identity. You don't just behave like a student, worker, consumer, citizen. You become these things. The roles aren't costumes you put on. They're written into your DNA, carved into your consciousness. You don't have an identity that exists independent of these disciplinary categories. You are these categories. Think about how you introduce yourself to others. What do you say? Your name, your job, your relationship status, your hobbies, all categories created by disciplinary society to organize, classify, and control human beings. You've been so thoroughly disciplined that you can't even conceive of yourself outside these imposed frameworks. Who are you when you're not a worker, student, parent, consumer? Can you even answer that question without falling back into other disciplinary categories? This is what Foucault meant when he talked about docile bodies, bodies that have been so thoroughly trained that they no longer resist. They don't need to be forced into compliance because they've learned to discipline themselves. You're not rebelling against the system because you've internalized the system so completely that rebellion seems impossible, or worse, meaningless. And the most tragic part, you probably feel grateful for this discipline. You call it civilization, progress, safety, order. You defend it. You participate in it willingly, even enthusiastically. You compete for the right to be more disciplined, more productive, more normal. You police others who step out of line. You've become not just a prisoner of the disciplinary society, but its willing enforcer. There is no outside of power. This might be Foucault's most devastating insight. There's no pure space of freedom where you can escape the mechanisms of control. Even your resistance is anticipated, categorized, contained. Your rebellion becomes another product to be consumed, another way to express your individuality within acceptable parameters. The system is so sophisticated that it feeds on resistance, incorporates it, neutralizes it. Look at how contemporary society handles dissent. Protest movements are quickly commodified, turned into fashion statements, marketing opportunities. Counterculture becomes mainstream culture. Even the most radical ideas are absorbed, sanitized, and sold back to you as lifestyle choices. Your punk rock t-shirt, your organic food, your meditation app. These aren't escapes from the disciplinary society. They're products of it, designed to give you the illusion of freedom while keeping you perfectly contained within acceptable boundaries of nonconformity. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of our disciplinary society is how it operates through what Foucault called normalization. You're not just controlled, you're measured against standards of normality that determine your worth, your sanity, your right to exist. Every test you've taken, every performance review you've received, every like and share on social media, these are all mechanisms of normalization that compare you to statistical averages and find you either acceptable or in need of correction. Your mental health, your physical appearance, your productivity, your relationships, all of these are constantly evaluated against norms that masquerade as objective standards but are actually tools of social control. When you feel anxious about not meeting these standards, when you feel guilty for not being productive enough, thin enough, social enough, that's the disciplinary society working exactly as designed. It's creating the very suffering it then offers to cure for a price. The individual is no doubt the fictitious atom of an ideological representation of society. But he is also a reality fabricated by this specific technology of power that I have called discipline. You are both the product and the producer of your own oppression. The individual that you believe yourself to be is not a natural, given fact. It's a construction, a fabrication, a piece of disciplinary technology designed to make you more controllable, more predictable, more useful to systems of power that exist far beyond your awareness or consent. And here's the twist that will make your head spin. Foucault isn't offering you an escape route. He's not giving you a revolutionary manual or a path to freedom. He's showing you the bars of your cage, and then telling you that recognizing the cage is all you can do. The disciplinary society is so totalizing, so complete, that even the act of critiquing it becomes part of its operation. Even this video, even these words, even your growing awareness of your own imprisonment, all of this is anticipated, incorporated, neutralized by the very system it claims to expose. But wait, before you sink into complete despair, before you surrender to the hopelessness of your situation, there's something else Foucault understood that might save you from total nihilism. Power, he realized, is not just oppressive, it's also productive. It doesn't just say no, it creates possibilities, generates desires, produces new forms of life. Where there is power, there is resistance. And yet, or rather consequently, this resistance is never in a position of exteriority in relation to power. This means that even within the disciplinary society, even within the most oppressive systems of control, there are always cracks, fissures, moments of possibility. Not escape, that's an illusion, but micro-resistances, tiny acts of refusal, small ways of being that disrupt the smooth operation of disciplinary power. These don't overthrow the system, but they create breathing room, moments of authentic existence within an inauthentic world. Think about those moments in your life when you've acted without calculation, without concern for productivity or normality or approval. Those moments when you've been seized by genuine desire, real emotion, authentic connection. Those moments when you've forgotten to perform your assigned role and just existed as raw human energy. These are the cracks in the disciplinary society. They're not freedom, they're glimpses of what freedom might feel like if it were possible. Foucault's final years were dedicated to exploring these possibilities. He became fascinated with what he called technologies of the self practices, through which individuals might create new forms of subjectivity, new ways of relating to themselves and others. Not through grand political revolution, but through patient, careful work on oneself, through questioning, experimenting, refusing to accept the given categories of identity and normality. The care of the self is essential for the care of others. This isn't self-help mysticism, it's political resistance. When you begin to question the disciplinary mechanisms that have shaped your identity, when you start to experiment with different ways of being, you're not just changing yourself, you're disrupting the smooth operation of power. You're creating interference in the system. But let me be clear, this isn't about becoming a better consumer of alternative lifestyles. It's not about buying different products or adopting new habits that make you feel more authentic. It's about the much more difficult work of examining the deepest assumptions about who you are and who you're supposed to be. It's about recognizing that even your most intimate desires might be products of disciplinary power, and then having the courage to sit with that uncertainty without rushing to find new certainties to replace the old ones. This is where most people stop. This is where the comfortable illusions reassert themselves. Because the alternative, living with the constant uncertainty of not knowing who you really are beneath all the layers of discipline, is terrifying. It's easier to accept the prison of known identity than to venture into the unknown territory of undefined existence. But for those brave enough to continue, for those willing to live with the discomfort of not knowing, there are possibilities that the disciplinary society cannot anticipate or contain. There are ways of being that slip through the cracks of surveillance, forms of desire that refuse to be commodified, relationships that resist categorization, thoughts that cannot be captured by any algorithm. Freedom is not about being able to do what you want, but about becoming who you are. This isn't the false freedom of consumer choice or political rights. This is the terrifying freedom of constant self-creation, of refusing to accept any final definition of yourself, of living in the space between identities rather than within them. And here's what the disciplinary society fears most: that you might discover that you don't need its categories, its norms, its promises of security and meaning. That you might find ways of existing that don't serve its purposes, that don't contribute to its smooth operation. That you might become genuinely unpredictable, truly creative, authentically alive in ways that cannot be measured, quantified, or controlled. This is not about becoming a better person or achieving some ideal state of enlightenment. This is about embracing the fundamental uncertainty of human existence, the radical possibility that you might be something other than what you've been trained to be. It's about living as a question rather than as an answer, existing as a process rather than as a fixed entity. Be yourself is the most disciplinary command of all. It assumes there's a fixed self to be, a predetermined identity to discover and express. But what if there is no self to be? What if identity is just another prison? Another form of discipline disguised as liberation? What if the deepest freedom lies not in being yourself, but in becoming something that has no name, no category, no place in the orderly world of disciplinary society? The surveillance cameras are still watching. The algorithms are still tracking. The disciplinary mechanisms are still operating with ruthless efficiency. Nothing has changed in the external world, but something has shifted in you. You've seen the strings. You've felt the weight of the invisible chains. You can no longer pretend that your choices are entirely your own, that your desires are purely natural, that your identity is God-given or self-created. This knowledge is a burden, but it's also a gift. It's the beginning of a different kind, of existence not free from power, because that's impossible, but aware of power's operations and therefore capable of small acts of resistance. Tiny experiments in self-creation, microscopic refusals that add up to something larger than their individual parts. The thought of the outside is a thought of resistance. You are thinking outside thoughts right now. You are feeling the edges of the disciplinary cage. You are recognizing the artificial nature of the categories that have defined your life. This recognition won't free you. Nothing can do that, but it will change how you inhabit your imprisonment. It will give you options you didn't know you had, possibilities you couldn't previously imagine. And perhaps, in the end, that's enough. Perhaps the goal isn't escape, but transformation. Perhaps the point isn't to break free from all forms of power, but to find ways of existing within power relations that preserve some space for genuine human flourishing. Perhaps the question isn't how to be free, but how to be more fully alive within the constraints that define human existence. Do not ask who I am, and do not ask me to remain the same. This is Foucault's final challenge to you. Stop asking yourself who you are. Stop trying to maintain a consistent identity. Stop believing that you have some essential nature that needs to be discovered or expressed. Instead, ask, what am I becoming? What possibilities exist in this moment that didn't exist before? How can I live in a way that surprises even myself? The disciplinary society will continue its operations. The mechanisms of control will adapt and evolve. New forms of surveillance and normalization will emerge. But you now have something the system cannot entirely account for: the knowledge of your own construction, the awareness of your own malleability, the recognition that nothing about your current existence is necessary or permanent. This knowledge is dangerous. It makes you less predictable, less controllable, less useful to systems that depend on your compliance. It makes you a problem to be solved rather than a resource to be exploited. And that, in itself, is a form of resistance. The choice now is yours, not the false choice between predetermined options, but the real choice between continuing to live as an unconscious product of disciplinary power or beginning the difficult work of conscious self-transformation, between accepting the categories that have been imposed on you or experimenting with new ways of existing that have not yet been captured by any system of control. There is no guarantee that this choice will make you happier or more successful or more fulfilled. In fact, it might make your life more difficult, more uncertain, more challenging, but it will make your life more yours, not in the sense of ownership, but in the sense of active participation in your own becoming. I don't write a book so that it will be the final word. I write a book so that other books are possible, not necessarily written by me. Foucault's work doesn't end with his conclusions, it begins with them. What you do with this knowledge, how you live with these insights, what possibilities you create in your own existence. These are the real tests of whether his philosophy has any value beyond academic exercise. You are living in a disciplinary society. This is not a hypothesis or a theory. It's the water you swim in, the air you breathe, the ground you stand on. But now you know it, and knowing it changes everything, even if it changes nothing. The cage is still there, but you can see its bars. The strings are still pulling, but you can feel their tension. The discipline is still operating, but you are no longer its unconscious subject. What you do with this awareness is up to you. But whatever you do, you can never again claim innocence. You can never again pretend that your life is entirely your own creation or that your choices are made in perfect freedom. You are complicit in your own discipline, participant in your own control, collaborator in your own imprisonment. And that recognition, painful as it is the beginning of whatever freedom might still be possible in a world where power operates through the very mechanisms of self-understanding and self-care that we use to make sense of our lives. The revolution, if it comes at all, will not be fought with weapons or won through politics. It will be lived, moment by moment, in the small choices you make about who to become in a world that has already decided who you should be. The disciplinary society is counting on your compliance. It's betting that you'll choose the comfortable prison of known identity over the uncomfortable possibility of constant becoming. It's wagering that you'll prefer the security of predetermined meaning to the anxiety of self-creation. Prove it wrong. Not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through the patient, difficult work of becoming something that doesn't fit neatly into any category. Something that resists easy classification, something that maintains its capacity for surprise in a world that has already mapped out every possible response to every conceivable situation. The surveillance is total, but it's not perfect. The discipline is comprehensive, but it's not complete. The control is sophisticated, but it's not absolute. In the gaps between what power expects and what actually happens, in the space between who you're supposed to be and who you might become, there are possibilities that no system can entirely eliminate. Find them, live them, become them. Not because it will change the world, it might not, but because it will change you. And changing yourself in a world designed to keep you exactly as you are is the most radical act of all. Michel Foucault's dark truth about disciplinary society is not that we are prisoners, it's that we are the architects of our own prison, the guards of our own cells, the judges of our own crimes against an artificial normality that we mistake for natural law. But once you see the blueprint, once you understand the architecture, once you recognize your role in the construction and maintenance of your own captivity, that's when the real work begins. The work of becoming human in a world that has forgotten what that means. The work of living authentically in a society built on performance. The work of creating meaning in a system designed to provide it for you. The work of being free in a prison of your own making. This work has no end. There is no final liberation, no ultimate enlightenment, no permanent escape. There is only the daily practice of conscious existence, the ongoing experiment of self-creation, the continuous choice between reproducing the patterns that have shaped you or discovering what else might be possible. The disciplinary society is not going anywhere, but neither are you. And in that standoff between system and self, between power and possibility, between control and creation, something new might emerge, something that was never supposed to exist, something that no surveillance can capture, something that no discipline can contain. That something is you. Not the you that you think you are, but the you that you might become. The you that exists in the spaces between categories, in the moments between identities, in the silence between thoughts. The you that is always already more than any system can comprehend or contain. Michel Foucault spent his life showing us the bars of our cage. What we do with that knowledge is up to us, but we can never again claim we didn't know. We can never again pretend we are free. We can only choose moment by moment, how to live with the knowledge of our own imprisonment and the possibility of our own transformation. The choice is yours. The cage is real. The possibilities are endless. What happens next depends on how much truth you can bear and how much change you can create in a world that profits from your stagnation and depends on your compliance. Are you living in a disciplinary society? The answer is yes. The question is, what are you going to do about it?